Welcome along to Oulton Park, everybody. The second of our Porsche races of the day, the first for the Club Motorsport Championship in contact with Pirelli is there, and already we've got an incident on the start-finish line. Up on the two wheels goes Peter Evans, smashes into the side of, I'm afraid, Shiraz Khan. We've also got Pete Morris involved, and number 44 has also got tangled up as well, which is the car of Andrew Porter. So without question, I suspect the red flags will be coming on. These cars had gone onto the grid slightly earlier, which almost caught us out, and now they've caught us out with an incident straight away at the beginning of our first Porsche Club Motorsport Championship with Pirelli, which also includes the AM Championship for this season. But it was a bit of a ride for Pete Evans as his car got sandwiched in between Pete Morris and the pit wall and then went up on its side, came back down again onto all four wheels with broken suspension, but yeah, also tangled up in that Shiraz car. Pete Morris, Pete Evans, and also the number 44 car of Andrew Porter. So that brings about, understandably, the early red flag for this one. Didn't quite see what happened at the start of that incident, but Pete Morris started 7th on the grid. Peter Evans was 9th on the grid, so maybe he got a slightly better start and had drawn himself up alongside. And I think Shiraz Khan, who was one of the Class 2 cars, and also the other Class 2 car, number 44 of Andrew Porter, also getting involved in as well. So 4 cars, all in various states of repair or disrepair, sitting there on the start-finish line, blocking the track, some of them with suspension damage. No choice from the officials up in race control but to throw the red flag and stop the race immediately. To make sure the drivers are all okay, which is the most important thing and is paramount to everything. And then obviously there's the clearing up that needs to be done to get the cars out of harm's way, ensure that the marshals have done any requisite sweeping up that's required, and then we can get some sort of resumption of this one. So the recovery crews are on their way around to the start-finish line, and from having started this one slightly early, it's a good job we have, because it's going to take a while to clear it up. There you can see the damage to Pete Morris's car. All of the drivers are out of the cars, so you can see Pete Morris there busy chatting away. You can see the damage to the whole of the right-hand side of his car. Then there's fluid and oil that's been strewn across the circuit from one side to the other. The number 22 car of Pete Evans, right the way on the right-hand side there. His is the Dayglow and the black car, and his car has gone from totally one side of the circuit to the other. So his has taken a big old ride. Shiraz Khan in the white overalls looking understandably very frustrated that he got tangled up in an incident that was unfolding ahead of him. And you get that sort of chain reaction, don't you, where the incident happens further up the grid and therefore the next car is able to react to it because he can see what's happening. The car behind gets less time to react because view's slightly obscured by the car ahead, and then you go 2 or 3 rows back and then you get that concertina effect. And unfortunately that was just what happened there. But the one thing is, all of the drivers out of the cars, you can see them all chatting away the finer points of it, but that unfortunately is a chunk of damage there and is probably going to put certainly 2, 3, if not all 4 of those cars out for our second race that was scheduled to take place around about 10 to 5 this afternoon. So frustrating really for the drivers, frustrating for the spectators who are hoping for some good action from the Porsche Club Motorsport and Porsche Motorsport AM Championship, but we will get a restart to this race. It will just mean it'll take a while to sort it out, and we'll be 4 cars less than we were. The rest of the cars have all been held, understandably, just before the start-finish line, so they're all in single file, parked over to the left-hand side, which allows any further recovery crews and course vehicles to get to the scene, so they're uninterrupted access to get to where those 4 cars have come to rest. So there you can see exactly why allows the breakdown recovery teams to instantly have free access to work their way past everybody. You see another driver out of the car there as well, just walking up, maybe to perhaps survey a little bit of damage on his car as well, because there were a few other cars that also had contact with each other. And I think that is, yeah, just one of the drivers there just walking around the car, just double checking everything on it. Can't quite pick out whom that would be from where it's parked up. It's one of the Boxsters, but I can't quite tell. The main scene for the clearing up all being done now. Every driver is out of the car, but one of the mandatory requirements within motorsport is if you're involved in an impact accident, you have to go to the medical centre just to be checked out. So that's why the drivers are getting in the medical car. Not that there's any issues with them at all, but it's one of the standard practices that Motorsport UK insist on. Any car that's involved in an impact accident, the drivers have to go to the medical centre for a brief checkup, and then once they've been checked, so that they're not showing any signs of any injury or concussion or anything like that, which is very infrequently the case. Then they're simply released back, and then the cars are released from the scrutineering bay back to the team. So chunk of work to do, 3 recovery units on hand, 4 cars to pick up, which means that one of these recovery trucks is probably going to be on double duties unless another one arrives, because I suspect all 4 of them will probably need suspended tows, unless one recovery truck can winch one on the back of the flatbed and then potentially put another one on the end of the tow rope. But certainly Pete Morris's car has got bodywork touching wheels, so that's going to have to be put on the flatbed recovery unit. I could see that Pete Evans's car, that's the black and the Dayglow car, the Dayglow yellow flashes to it on the right hand side of the screen. He'd got a broken front right suspension by the time he'd come off the pit wall, and you could see the tyre marks. Look at how wavy the tyre marks are in the background as he started to make contact with Pete Morris and then rode up the side of the car. So he'd got 2 wheels on the ground, and the other 2 wheels were right up in the air, almost brushing the pit wall. So thankfully it was reasonably low speed on the basis that they'd just gone off the start-finish line. But in the background now you can see that all the rest of the cars have been ushered up towards the start. They should start in their original starting positions, so there shouldn't be any new grid issued, because there was less than a lap that had been completed at the time that the race was brought to a halt. It will be restarting in their original grid positions, which does mean then we'll have a gap on the 4th row of the grid, the 5th row of the grid, the 7th row of the grid, and a gap on, what will that be, the 8th row of the grid. So this is going to take a good 5 or 10 minutes to clear up, but as ever, our fantastic Oulton Park marshals going to work to clear up the incident. Now, most of these marshals, not all of them, but most of them will be members of the BMMC, which is the British Motorsport Marshals Club, who are the most populous club in the UK. They provide marshals on a voluntary basis, so they're all unpaid volunteers, all of the marshals, you know, to lots and lots of race meetings. But the marshals are all hugely trained, so there's lots of training days all throughout the country over the winter time, where they go through not just the theoretical side of marshalling, but also the practical side of marshalling as well, where they'll do mock incidents. They will have some scrap cars that remove all the interiors from, punch out all of the windows, and then they'll set fire to them for fire training, to understand as to how you extinguish a fire, which very rarely happens in a car, but occasionally they need to move in with the fire extinguishants, which is usually the dry powder to start with, and then the film, the aqueous film forming foam, the AFFF, thereafter, both of which do a very different job when it comes to firefighting. And then they will also head out onto their individual circuits and individual marshals posts to again do another range of practical examinations and things. Most of them are licensed from Motorsport UK nowadays, but if you want to become a marshal, you've got to start somewhere. And one of the things you could do is log on to marshals.co.uk, marshals.co.uk. That's the official website for the British Motorsport Marshals Club, and sign up to a taster day. A taster day, what it does is there'll be various taster days, numerous circuits throughout the course of the season have them. Numerous dates. There'll be a big long list of all of the taster days that you can get involved with. You sign up to a date and a circuit that's convenient to you. You get sent through a ticket via email usually, and then you are met by your mentor, a hugely experienced marshal, who will meet you and all the rest of the individuals that will be on the marshalling day, the taster day as well. Usually anywhere between, could be 6 or a dozen and a half. And you're all there, you know, trying to experience what it's like. And in the morning, you get almost a guided tour of all the different areas where you can get involved in volunteer marshalling, whether it be out on the individual marshals posts that you see, where all of the marshals have different roles. So some of them will be course marshals or incident marshals, so they'll get involved in the incidents and the clearing up. You'll have the flag marshals, who are obviously the individuals that wave the flags or control the light boxes, as we have at most of the circuits nowadays. Then you have the post chief as well, so that's a very experienced marshal that's in charge of all the other marshals that are working on that post, and he relays what's going on in his area to race control. And that's just the marshal's post. You can then have scrutineering, so the technical and the safety process that all of the cars go through before they join the circuit in the morning. So you can get involved in scrutineering, you can get involved in the assembly area or pit lane or parc fermé, which is where the cars go to after the race. You can get involved in timekeeping potentially. The rescue units weren't needed for this one, but the rescue units are registered ambulances and contain all of the cutting and extraction equipment that we need in the event of a very serious accident where we need to extract the driver to prevent any further injury. You can get involved in that as well. You get that guided tour all in the morning, what happens in race control and all the areas you can get involved, all of that in the morning. Then in the afternoon you go out onto an individual marshal's post with the team, the experienced team around you to guide you through what you need to do out on the marshal's post. You never asked to go out on a live circuit, but you might be asked to go out once the red flags have happened to do the sweeping up and things like that. And it gives you a really good idea, single day, as to whether marshalling's for you or not. So why not sign up for a taste today? Marshals.co.uk. What have you got to lose? So we've already got 3 of the cars that have left the scene. I think the most heavily damaged one of them, which is the unfortunate Pete Evans and his Par Motorsport United Hygiene Solutions car, is just now about to be dealt with. But once we get the final and the third of the breakdown recovery units out of the way, one of them has got to drop a car back into what will be the Parc Ferme area, which is where all of these cars will be held. They don't just instantly go back to the teams. They'll be held in Parc Ferme under controlled conditions until the drivers have been checked out and released from the medical centre. And then the scrutineers will want to have a once-over of all of the cars and check for the damage on them. And then they'll be released back to the teams to see whether they can effect repair for later on today. But looking at the damage on 1 or 2 of them, I do think we've lost at least 3 of those 4 cars for the rest of the day potentially. So one of the recovery units will drop the car at the Parc Ferme area, and then we'll have to quickly get back onto circuit and pick up a second car. We've got one car that's headed for the pit lane, Jason Brown's car. You can just see off to the very left-hand side of the shot there. That's the gold-coloured car that's just come into a pit lane. That'll be Jason Brown's Ignite Motorsport car that has vacated its position on the grid. So he is going to have to start from the pit lane on the restart. Maybe that was also a car that was involved in a little bit of contact, and the team and driver just want to make sure everything is good, that any bodywork is not touching wheels, or maybe there was another issue with the car. But he is there in the pit lane at the moment. All the rest of the cars have been beckoned forward into their positions, which I suppose does give me an opportunity to go through what the grid will look like. We'll do that probably when they're on their next formation lap, because they will have another green flag formation lap for this one. So they'll get another lap of the Oulton Park International Circuit that we're on, which is 2.692 miles. The times were set in what was a cloudy and damp qualifying. It's still quite overcast here at Oulton Park. There's a slight breeze, but it's nice warm ambient temperature, but it was quite damp for qualifying in the Porsches. So I suspect the lap times that they'll be setting, the fastest lap of this race, will probably be quicker than the pole position time because of those damp conditions. Right, one recovery truck, first car dispatched, back out onto circuit again. We mentioned the marshals, we don't really mention the recovery teams, who very, very professional teams who are under that pressure. You know, they've got to affect the recovery of the cars quickly, but equally as much what they can't really afford to do is cause any further damage to the cars by doing it too quickly. So they are hugely experienced in motorsport recovery, CC recovery, who don't just recover cars here at Oulton Park, but tend to do it at most of the UK circuits that you see. Maybe not down at Brands Hatch, but certainly you see them at Snetterton. They'll be all down at Silverstone for the Grand Prix next weekend, the British Grand Prix. So again, they'll put the strops through the wheels into the correct positions, get the legs out on the high ab, and then cradle the car up, supported on all 4 corners, up onto the flatbed recovery. Of course, rear-engine Porsche, so the rear of the car is going to be heavier than the front end of the car. Yes, it will have a full fuel tank because they'd have fueled the cars for the race, but it's still going to be tail-happy or tail-heavy, the car. So it looks so largely all the sweeping up has been done. That's a mixture of, one would have thought, oil and coolant that's been spread around the circuit. So they place onto it the, for want of a better term, cement dust. It's not cement dust, but it is dust that soaks up the coolant and the oil. And then, of course, it has to be brushed away. It will still leave a cloud when the cars come over it, but it will do a very good job of meaning that those areas aren't slippy anymore. And it looks as though there still might be another line that just needs dealing with as yet. So you can see a line coming from the back of the course car, underneath the course car, to the back of the recovery truck. That looks like that's another line that might just need something putting on it. But I think what they'll do is leave that until everything is out of harm's way. So final car being lifted which is Pete Evans. That's the Par Motorsport car. Par Motorsport, who are a very, very long time Porsche specialist and prepare cars not just for this championship but for most Porsche championships in the UK and some internationally as well. You can see the damage to not just the front of the car of Pete Evans, but particularly the right hand side of it. That will need dealing with. More sweeping up to be done, where I think they put a temporary dam there of mud at the front of Pete Evans' car, because you can see the coolant has trickled its way further along onto the tarmac as well. So there's still, I would imagine, a bit more sweeping up to be done. The cars are now out of harm's way though. Thankfully, no barrier damage. I think the officials off to the left-hand side are just inspecting the pit wall there, just to, again, understand it's, understand the incident more than anything. Most of the cars will have judicial cameras on board so that they can piece together exactly what happens, and that's not on the basis of trying to apportion blame. It's just trying to understand exactly what caused the incident in the first place. So I think they are inspecting the pit wall because, as we say, the number 22 car of Pete Evans did ride up against it, which is very unusual to see indeed. So his car being moved out of harm's way, that coolant that had trickled its way forward, where they'd built the temporary dam of mud, the marshals, to stop it going any further, can now be dealt with. And then I think there's that train that needs to go up towards the front of the safety car that will also need sorting out as well. There's a train or a line of fluid again. So lots of hard work being done by our marshals, the race director, just heading back in towards the course car on the BMW to conclude a further clearing lap of the circuit, just to check there's no other issues around the track. And then even after that, the job's not quite done there, because there'll be lots of paperwork to fill out up in race control, and maybe the odd driver or two just to speak to, just to understand their side of the story. So I think that's most of the sweeping up done. Marshals have done that as quickly as they possibly can. Thankfully no circuit furniture has been damaged, so there's no need to repair barriers. And then hopefully we can get another formation lap underway in what is now going to be a reduced time race. It's scheduled for 25 minutes, but because of the length of the delay, it's going to be just a 20-minute race now, is what we understand from race control, for what will be round 5 of the 2024 Porsche Motorsport Championship, Porsche Club Motorsport Championship with Pirelli, including the Porsche Club Motorsport AM Championship. What's happened so far in the championship, we haven't really alluded to that so far, but the man who starts from pole position in this one, which is Simon Clark, has won 3 of the 4 races so far this year. The only race he didn't win, Simon Clark, his is the white, the light green and the darker green car to the left of your screens. The only race he didn't win was the opening round of the championship, which took place at Donington Park. He didn't win that. He finished second on that occasion, but he has won the subsequent 2. The other driver that has won a race is Mark McAleer, who is a former champion, and he will line up on this one in the number 14 car, 5th on the grid. So Simon Clark, arguably the one to watch based on what he's done so far this season. And for Simon Clark, he was an overall champion in 2020, but he won the Class C1 championship, so the Class 1 championship in 2021 and 22, whereas Mark McAleer, the other driver to have taken a win, but is only 5th. He was the overall champion back in 2007, would you believe, and 2017. He took the Class 1 championship in 07 and in 17, the year he won overall, and he won it in 16 as well. So he's another very quick driver. In the AM Championship, what's happened so far this year? Well, Angus Archer has claimed the opening 2 races so far this season. His number 70 car, and he was 6th quickest, though, of the Class 2 cars in qualifying. So he finished second, won the 2 races at Donington Park and was 4th in the 2 races at Brands Hatch. Let's guide you through the grid then, the way that they line up. Simon Clark starts from pole position, and Ed Hayes is alongside, had a brilliant qualifying session. James Cayley is there on row number 2, and Richard Baston is there on row number 3, on the outside of row number 2. Row 3 of the grid, Mark McAleer lines up alongside Chris Dyer, and on row 4 there'll be a gap where we should have had Pete Morris, so Jake McAleer will now be on his own. The 5th row of the grid, Pete Evans was another one of those involved in the red red flag incident, so there'll be a gap there, 9th on the grid. So on his own will be Paul Simpson on that row. And then it's Jamie Callender. Happy birthday, Jamie Callender. It's his birthday today. He was the first of the Class 2 cars. He is next alongside Bill Cayley on row number 6. Row 7 of the grid. On the inside, we won't have Shiraz Khan, so it'll just be Darren Lebet, who is on his own, 14th on the grid. And then the next row of the grid will also have a gap. Number 74 will be there, Jim Bryant, but Andrew Porter will be absent. He was involved in the incident. Then no further gaps from here on in. Jessica Wilkinson lines up alongside Angus Archer. Then it's Paul Brown and Paul Seagrave. And the final row of the grid should be Julian Morris, who has Carl Hazelton for company. And that gives you the full grid and also picks out those gaps so far. So yeah, Class 2 we were talking about. Angus Archer, 2 wins in the first couple of rounds and was 2 fourths at Brands Hatch, but he was only 6th quickest in qualifying. Leading the Class 2 Championship coming into this one is one of those drivers that was involved in that incident, which was Andrew Porter, who'd only had firsts and second places in Class 2 so far this year. So that really opens up the Championship. So with Andrew Porter being absent, it gives the likes of Angus Archer, who's 2nd in the Championship, a little bit to go at here. So light breeze, warm conditions, busy crowd, Oulton Park, what's not to like in the Cheshire countryside. As part of the supercar pageant weekend, lots of supercars out on circuit, whether they be racing or whether they be doing demo laps. So Simon Clark in the white and the light green car, starting from pole position. It's the all light blue car of Ed Hayes that's alongside, so it's the 997 and the Cayman on the front row of the grid. Row 2 of the grid is a 997 and a 996. It's James Cayley's car, which is green and cream for this year, alongside the 996 of Richard Baston. And then Mark McAleer and Chris Dyer, that's a 997 and a Cayman respectively, in the hands of the 2 former outright champions. So Chris Dyer was an overall champion back in 2010 when he won the Class 2 of the Championship. He won it 2 years on the trot, 2010, 2011, but he was the overall champion across all of the classes in 2010, Chris Dyer. And he, based on the second fastest qualifying times from the session this morning, which gives us the grid for race 2, is going to line up even higher up on the grid for race 2, Chris Dyer. That was one of the things I picked up when the grids were finally issued. So we've got those few gaps on the grid. We've got what will be 20 minutes on the clock now. Slightly revised time, 5 minutes less to make up for the time that we've lost with the red flag incident. Green flag flies at the back. Red lights will come on, hopefully for the last time in this race on the gantry. And it's Simon Clark and Ed Hayes on the front row of the grid. Lights go out now, and it looks as though it's a good start from Simon Clark from pole position. A brilliant start from James Cayley as well. Up towards Old Hall Corner they'll go for the first time, and it's going to be Simon Clark that leads the way. Ed Hayes slots his way through into 2nd place, and despite the good start, James Cayley is there in 3rd. There was a spin and I think maybe a little bit of contact as somebody went off the road there and rejoined, which was Richard Baston, I think, who was 4th, but is now down to something like 8th, 9th, maybe even 10th, I would have thought. Top 3 have got away, and then the gap, which does suggest, yeah, it was Richard Baston who was there in 4th, but he's split the pack a little bit as he's tumbled his way down through the order. So through Island Bend and in towards the braking area for Shell for the first time. Ed Hayes under pressure from James Cayley. The Cayman coming under attack from the 992 Carrera 2 Sport out of Shell Oils, and start to sprint their way up towards the braking area for Britons. Cayman, a slightly lighter car, but it's got less brake horsepower. The 997, a heavier car, but it's got more grunt, but they are pretty much equalised in terms of the power to weight ratio. It's all to do with how you use your tyres. The heavier car, you could argue, will use its Pirellis up a little bit more than maybe the lighter and slightly more nimble Cayman, but usually what we see is the Caymans and the 997s all pretty evenly matches, and the 996s mixing it amongst them as well. So it does work well, the regulations for this championship. Out of Knickerbrook, starting to carve their way uphill. It looks as though it is the McAleers that are 4th and 5th respectively, which I would imagine is Mark McAleer ahead of Jake McAleer. And in fact, no, it's Jake McAleer ahead of Mark McAleer, because Jake's has the black nose to it, whereas his father, Mark, has the silver nose to it. So it's Jake that's got himself ahead of Mark, by the look of things. Up towards the braking area for Lodge at the end of the first lap. Simon Clark leading the way, and has the benefit of that little bit of daylight between himself and Ed Hayes, who's there in 2nd place. So through they'll go, completing the first lap of the race. Simon Clark leads the way from Ed Hayes. Ed Hayes in 2nd place, James Cayley in 3rd. It is Jake McAleer ahead of Mark McAleer, so I was right there. And Chris Dyer is down there in 6th position. Bill Cayley is 7th. 8th at the moment is going to be the next of the cars through, which is going to be the number 7 car. sorry, the number 1 car, I should say, that's next through, which is going to be Paul Simpson. And then it's Julian Morris and Richard Baston, who did lose a raft of places, leading Class 2 in the early stages. It is birthday boy. Jamie Callender leads Class 2. So it is his birthday actually today as well in the Specialist Motorworks machine. So he had a good qualifying, qualified on pole in Class 2 and is leading it in the early stages. There's number 85, Richard Baston, diving up the inside and gaining a place on Julian Morris. He needs to because of all the places that he lost when the lights went out, Richard. So he started 4th on the grid, but came through and over the start-finish line 10th at the end of that first lap. So he's made a little bit more progress now. Jim Bryan's not that far away either, at the wheel of the very distinctively liveried car. Now this is Chris Dyer coming under track from Bill Cayley by the look of things. This is going to be for 6th and for 7th position, the two Caymans. Bill Cayley's with a little bit of damage on the front left-hand corner, and also the right rear by the look of things is also showing a few little battle scars, so he may have been one of those that just brushed off one of the cars when the incident unfolded. We also just had a green flag at Hilltop, which suggests we've got a spin, and it's Simon Clark. So it was the race leader. I saw the green flag at Clay Hill, and that makes me wonder, right, that looks like that's a suspension failure on the car. It is. The suspension has failed as he's come out of the corner. Look at the angle of that left rear wheel. And for Simon Clark, that is an absolute disaster for the man who's leading the championship and has failed to finish off the top 2 steps of the podium all season so far. He's going to have to bring that car not just into the pit lane, but into retirement, I'm afraid, and there's work to do there to even get that car out for race 2 later on, which is scheduled to take place around about 10 to 5 this evening. So 20 minutes just over to go on our clock. I think that's actually 5 minutes out. I think that's still counting down based on the original 25 minutes. I make it there's about 15 minutes of the race to go. Battles further down through the order. Richard Baston still trying to make progress. Paul Simpson, who was the overall champion last year, he has now dealt with as well. The battle of the two Caymans has altered, so Bill Cayley has managed to squeeze his way through and ahead of the car of Chris Dyer, and I'm afraid it's Dyer for Simon Clark because he is out of the race, the championship leader. So couldn't even limp the car back to the pit lane, but clearly that was what caused the spin in the first place. You can still see the damage also to the front left-hand corner of Bill Cayley's car. That's right where the radiators are on the Cayman. So he's rather got away with that. Keep an eye on those engine temperatures though. Doesn't look as though there's any coolant coming out of it. But it's also not slowing Bill up because he's managed to pick the pocket of Chris Dyer on that previous lap and is now looking to try and see if he can scoot away in his slightly battered car. So up towards Druids they will go. There'll be a localised yellow flag somewhere to forewarn them of where Simon Clark has parked his car up. He's parked it up on the inside there, hasn't he, of Druids? That's why we've got green flags on the exit, so there's no overtaking on the run in towards Druids. It's not really an overtaking spot anyway. But over the start-finish line, it's now going to be, of course, Ed Hayes in the light blue car that leads the way. James Cayley in second place, and Jake McAleer having a really good run as he sits there in third place. Jake's another former champion on the grid. He was the Class 2 champion back in 2017. See what he might be able to do as he looks to try and close up onto the coattails of James Cayley. Now, Jake McAleer's best result so far this year has been third place. Well, that's where he is at the moment. How many third places has he had? Well, he's already had 3 out of the 4 races we've been in. So Jake would dearly like to make it a further improvement up to second if he can. And the man that's between him and that second spot is going to be James Cayley at the moment, who his best is a third so far this year. He's had a couple of fourths and a third. So James on for his best result of the season. Jake McAleer looking to try and make it his best result of the season. And if these two squabble, it might just release Ed Hayes up the road a little bit at the wheel of the light blue car. And Ed Hayes, his best result of the season so far. He's leading this race, remember. 6th is his best result so far. Side by side for second and third place. And James Cayley's going to hang on to it, is he? It looks as though he is. So the two 997s going at it, allowing the Cayman to get away in the lead of the race. Another 997 closing in the background is going to be Mark McAleer at the wheel of his number 14 car. So 13 minutes to go. Good battle for second and for third place. The race leader getting away as a result. And as they then twist their way through double apex right-hander at Druids, it's still James Cayley. Still under pressure from Jake McAleer. looks one way, looks the other. James Cayley covers off the inside line on the run down towards Lodge, so Jake then picks the outside line. Nice wide sweep into the corner. Try and see if he can get the undercut on the way out, but that's not quite going to work as they head up towards Deer Leap. So again, James Cayley is having to defend from Jake McAleer. He's trying to prise the door open on the run down in towards the braking area for Old Hall Corner. He's got the inside line. He's drawn himself alongside. Can he get through? James Cayley gives him room. They lean on each other as they go through the corner, but Jake McAleer is through and up into second position. So Jake now on for his best result of the season so far, which would be second place, and James Cayley is now back down in third, which is his best result of the season so far. He wants to try and thread his way through up towards Old Hall Corner. That got quite tight, didn't it, as Julian Morris tried to thread his way up the inside, and then as a result of that, Jim Bryant goes around the outside at Old Hall Corner and takes the place away from him whilst he was trying to gain one. Richard Baston still trying to work his way back up through the order at the wheel of the number 85 car. He's now got himself ahead of the overall champion from last year at the wheel of the Rindt vehicle design car. Rindt sponsoring the trophies in the Porsche Club Motorsport Championship with Pirelli this weekend. So the number 1 car in the hands of the overall champion from last year is in 8th place. Richard Baston is in 7th place. And they've got the pair of greeny Porsches behind, the first of which is Jim Bryan, the next of which is going to be Julian Morris. So that's a good little fight. That's going to be for 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th places. So over Hilltop they'll go. Julian Morris at the wheel of the 997. Richard Baston at the front of the queue in his 996. The Cayman sitting behind of the champion from last year, which is the Cayman 987 of Paul Simpson. Then the 996 of Jim Bryan, followed by the 997 again. So just going to show, I said that the 996 is the Porsches and the Caymans and the 997s all mix it up together. Well, they really do. The regulations absolutely work. Power to weight almost is what dictates the equivalency factor of all of these cars. And it does mean whether you're in the Cayman, the 997 or the 996, there's not a great deal of difference in the lap time. Worth mentioning also, there is a tyre allocation. All the cars running on controlled Pirelli tyres, those cars that run in Class 1 are limited to 1 set of tyres for every race meeting. So in other words, for qualifying in the 2 races today, a little bit of contact side to side there almost it looked. Jim Bryan and Paul Simpson getting close to each other. Again, they go side by side through Old Hall Corner. Paul Simpson runs out wide as a result of that, and now needs to be careful he doesn't lose a place to Julian Morris, who was trying to sneak up his inside as they went down through Dentons and in towards Cascades. Now Paul Simpson is trying to attack Jim Bryan on the other side. He's drawn himself alongside as they head along Lakeside, and he'll have the inside line when they get to Island Bend here. So Jim Bryan will squeeze him. Again, there's a little bit of contact between the pair of them, and Jim Bryan has squeezed him enough so that he can't come through. So that was tight driving from them both. You could just see a little black rubber mark down the side of Paul Simpson's car, a result of being squeezed. Side-to-side contact, but fair. So yeah, the Class 1 cars, set of tyres need to see them through qualifying in 2 races. The Class 2 cars get 1 new set of tyres for every second meeting. So it does mean that the tyres they used at Donington Park they would have to reuse at Brands, but for most of the Class 2 cars they'll get a brand new set here for Oulton Park this weekend, but they will also have to use those at Anglesey, where the Class 1 cars don't. Right, Mark McAleer now is looking to try and place James Cayley under pressure here. Jake McAleer having taken second place away from the number 11 car a few laps ago. Well, now Mark McAleer is looking to try and do exactly what his son Jake did a lap or 2 earlier, see whether he can work his way through up into the podium spots. And for Mark McAleer, an overtake here and an extra few championship points could be very vital, particularly based on the fact that his main championship rival, which was Simon Clark, is out of this race. Simon Clark was on 146 points coming into this race. Mark McAleer was on 137, so it was just 9 points between them. 25 points for a win, 21 for second, 18 for third, and so on. It diminishes from there. There's actually extra bonus points based on the number of starters in your class as well, up to a maximum of 10. So for Mark McAleer, he would like to try and see if he can get up into third place to net those 18 points. Who's got the extra lap time for fastest lap at the moment? That's going the way of his son Jake. That also carries an extra championship point. So over Hilltop they'll come, having come out of Britain's for what is the 7th time of asking. There's just under 8 minutes remaining on the clock. Best battle is for third and fourth at the moment. The leading pair, are they getting closer to each other? Well, with Jake McAleer having set the fastest lap of the race last time through, the lead advantage between Ed Hayes and Jake McAleer is 2 seconds there or thereabouts. But we need to keep an eye on what it is at the end of this lap, because Jake McAleer is certainly travelling quicker. There's Carl Hazelton fighting away with Jason Brown there in the gold-coloured car. Jessica Wilkinson's not that far behind as well. That's going to be for 15th, 16th and 17th places. That's all in Class 2 at the moment, the AM class. Leading the AM class at the moment. Not really seen much of him, but it's the number 12 car of Jamie Callender that leads that by about a second from Darren Lebet, the number 52 car, and Angus Archer is third in that at the moment. But Angus Archer is not that far behind, so that could well be worth watching out for, first, second and third in Class 2. This is a good battle still, though. Carl Hazelton started off the back of the grid, actually. So he was 22nd and last at the original start. Of course, he would have started something like 18th at the restart because of the 4 cars that were involved in the incident. But he's coming under the cosh, isn't he, from Jason Brown, the Ignite Motorsport car that I think started from the pit lane, still trying to squeeze its way through with 6 minutes to go. Jess Wilkinson in the Par Motorsport car, silver car with its purple and pink and yellow flashes, just falling away a little bit over the course of this lap. Now has Jason Brown got himself into position to try up the inside as they're heading towards Lodge? He is, yeah. Carl Hazelton can't do a great deal about it. And Jason Brown turns in towards Lodge corner, gets the car neatly off the corner, takes the place away. So that now means that Jason Brown will be up into 15th position, I would have thought. Yep, that's confirmed as he comes over the start-finish line. Richard Baston's still having a good fight. He has got Jim Bryan right behind him. So Jim Baston at the wheel of his 996, the Straza run car, being put under pressure by the County Classics and Goya car, which is in the hands of Jim Bryan, his 996. The two pretty evenly matched as they head with 5.5 minutes to go in towards the Hislop chicane. Flick right, flick left, and then back over for the right-hand side for Nicker Brook. And here, are we going to have the change? Can we see Mark McAleer go running outside of James Cayley? No, he tried it at Lodge, but couldn't quite get the job done there. That's the best opportunity he's had. And his son, in the meantime, is now setting about the race leader, which is Ed Hayes. So the McAleer family all rather busy in attack mode at the moment. Jake looking for the lead of the race. Father Mark looking to try and get up on the podium. So race leader, still the light blue Cayman in the hands of Ed Hayes. Remember, his best result of the season so far is a 6th position. Jake McAleer, his best result of the season so far is 3 third places. So both of these cars in first and second, on for their best results of the championship season so far in round 5 of the Porsche Club Motorsport Championship with Pirelli. 4.5 minutes to go, but it's not done and dusted as yet. How is James Cayley getting on? Well, he is still in full defence mode, trying to keep at bay number 14, which is Mark McAleer. Hopping over the curbs at Britain's go the leading pair. The next pair arrive and do exactly the same. Hop over the curbs, try and straighten up the exit and get on the power nice and early. See what you can do over Hilltop. And Jake McAleer's looking for the inside line here. You can see him squirming around under braking. Can he get the car stopped and turned in? Yes, he can. Jake McAleer picks up the lead of the race. Ed Hayes down into 2nd position. So it's a 3rd different leader of the race we've had so far. Simon Clark, wasn't it, in the early stages before his spin and retirement. Ed Hayes picked up the lead as a result of that. And now Jake McAleer leads the way. So up towards Druids they'll go. Father Mark McAleer hasn't as yet still been able to get back past James Cayley. So it's still James Cayley in the green car with the cream flashes down the side that hangs on to the place. Really smart looking livery on that car for this year. Moved from the green and gold, as we saw James in last year. Father Bill still has that livery, but the cream I think works that little bit better. Turning our way through the right-hander over the start-finish line onto what in reality then is their penultimate lap of the race this time through. And Jake McAleer now already 7/10 of a second or nearly up the road from the driver he's just taken the lead of the race away from, which is Ed Hayes. Now it's at this stage of the race where I know it's a slightly shorter race, but the tyres are just starting to feel it a bit more. They take quite a lot of punishment here at OULTON Park. The straights aren't that long. Some of the corners are very quick indeed, and therefore there's a lot of load going through the Control Pirelli tyres that they all run. So they also need to manage them, not just in this race, but also in the next race as well that they've got coming up. Remember, the Class 1 cars. James Cayley still hanging on to third. We've still got Cole Hazelton being kept busy as well in the number 24 Cayman. He has now got Jessica Wilkinson right up behind. Jess had fallen away a little bit, hadn't she? But now Cole Hazelton is starting to lose a bit more time. And Jessica Wilkinson in the Boxster at the local circuit as well. Porsche Chester prepare her car. So it'd be a good result if she could find her way through somewhere. So up towards a braking area for Lodge. There'll be no opportunity there, or it is. Yeah, she comes through very late on the brakes. Cole Hazelton sees her coming, but that was a really great move from Jessica Wilkinson there. Late on the brakes, up the inside of Cole Hazelton. He looked to turn in, but then realised there was a car alongside. Couldn't do so. She was quick into the corner, but she was slower out. And now Cole Hazelton is looking to try and re-attack at Old Hall, but he can't find his way through. So Jess Wilkinson does move through and is now up into 16th position. Cole Hazelton drops down to 17th. Now, for the lead of Class 2, Jamie Callender is being kept very honest indeed. He's got Darren Lebet, number 52, right behind him. And look, just behind that, that's Angus Archer that's behind that. So this is first, second and third in Class 2. So in other words, the lead of the AM Championship at this stage. So all three Boxsters very much together. Jamie Callender would love to have a win because it is his birthday today. That'd be the best birthday present for him and the Specialist Motorworks team. But he's going to have to work for it if he wants to hang on to it. So they've got another lap to go after this one, but the top three in the AM Championship are absolutely together as they wrestle their way out of Knickerbrook and are on lap number 10 at the moment. Now, Jamie Callender a little bit slower coming out of Knickerbrook, which offers up a possibility for Darren Lebet to see if he can work his way through at the wheel of the Woods Food Service car. It doesn't look as though he can do so. So through Druids they head underneath the Warwick Bridge and up towards Lodge Corner. Now, Darren Lebet from attack is now maybe minded to look at defence again because Angus Archer seem to be closing up a little bit, but they head out of Lodge and all of the top three in the AM Championship look fairly evenly spread actually as they head over the start-finish line. Can Angus Archer get an overlap? He's not quite going to be there by the time they get to Old Hall Corner, so the order remains the same. 22 seconds to go, which means they are all now onto their final lap of the race. Jake McAleer leading the way by not a huge margin still, just under 0.7 of a second. Mark McAleer in the meantime had worked his way through and ahead of James Cayley, so that has happened. Our race leader heading out of Druids for the final time though, and for Jake McAleer, he is on for his first win of the 2024 championship season. He's had 3 thirds, but for the final time he's going to be on the top step of the podium. And Jake McAleer is going to come through and over the start-finish line and looks as though he's on course to win round 5 of the Porsche Club Motorsport Championship with Pirelli, chased all of the way to the start-finish line by Ed Hayes, who still has his best result of the season by far. Mark McAleer comes through to finish in 3rd place. Good points for him, bearing in mind his main championship rival Simon Clark retired, having had the spin from the lead of the race with that suspension damage. It's going to be James Cayley who comes through to finish in 4th position. Bill Cayley, with even more damage to the car now, is going to come through and finish in 5th place. I think that's just one of the inner wheel arches now that's dropped down, so his car will need a bit of TLC before it heads back out for race 2 later on today. And Chris Dyer should be the next of those through. Richard Baston still being kept under pressure from Jim Bryan as they fight for what will be 7th and 8th place in this race, and I think Richard is just going to hang on to it, but disappointment for him having qualified 4th earlier on this morning in the damp conditions. Yeah, by 1/10 of a second he hangs on to 7th place. Next through he's going to be Julian Morris, who will finish in 9th place, and 10th place should be the champion from last year, Paul Simpson, at the wheel of the Rindt Vehicle Designs car. Here he comes now, the familiar Rindt colours. And then for Class 2, it looks as though it is going to be Jamie Callender on his birthday is going to scoop up the win in the AM category. Only just, though, from Angus Archer, is that not, who's going to come through and finish in 2nd place in the AM category. Got himself ahead of Darren Lebet in the closing stages of that one, so they did have the shuffle for the top 3 in the AM Championship, but it was Jamie Callender that hung on to the win. And we've still got fights going on. Carl Hazelton still fighting away with Jessica Wilkinson. Those two have shuffled one way and the other, but Carl Hazelton is just going to come through and finish ahead of Jessica Wilkinson, as those two have had pretty much a race-long battle for who wanted to be 16th and who wanted to be 17th. So I think that's all of the cars over the start-finish line. We lost 4 when the red flags came out with the start line incident. We lost Simon Clark at the restart of the race, but we have had everybody through to conclude round 5 of the championship. Jake McAleer claims his first win of the season by just under a second from Ed Hayes, who gets his best result of the season and finishes in 2nd place. And Mark McAleer is, subject to my maths, going to move to the lead of the championship as he finished there in 3rd. James Cayley was ahead of Bill Cayley for family bragging rights in 4th and 5th place, and Chris Dyer, the former champion, finished in 6th. Richard Bayston made up for the problems that befell him on lap number 1 to crawl his way back through the order and finish in 7th place, ahead of Jim Bryan, who was there in 8th place. Julian Morris was 9th, and completing the top 10 was Paul Simpson. As we move outside of the top 10, in 11th place, Jamie Callender wins the AM category, Class 2 in reality, only just though from Angus Archer and Darren Labette, who complete the Class 2 podium. Paul Seagrave was there in 14th place. 15th place went the way of Jason Brown, then it was Carl Hazelton and Jessica Wilkinson that were the last of the finishers. Number 23, Simon Clark, leading the race, suspension problems, retired. So that is it from the Porsche Club Motorsport Championship with Pirelli and the AM Championship. We'll be back for their 2nd race later on today at around about 10 to 5. But remember, we've also got a further race coming up for the Woods Food Services Boxster Cup, and that will take place prior to our 2nd race from the Porsche Championship. Boxster Cup coming up at 15:15. Our 2nd race from the Porsche Club Championship is around about 10 to 5. So until then, it's goodbye.